Today, I plan to talk a little bit about some of the theories from political theory and international relations and so on. And my motivation behind uh, talking about these theories is that we talk a lot about various social phenomena like various political and social activities, and even various aspects of business behavior as well, the strategies of business and so on.
Mm,
And what I have realized is that uh, we talk about the phenomena, we talk about the observations, but we are not able to interpret it through a proper framework. So what I mean by that is that unlike in science, there are various frameworks to analyze or to interpret a phenomena. And the thing is that it exists in social
mm,
sciences as well. But because we are from a science background and an engineering background, we haven't formally studied them. So mostly our discussions are just on the phenomena. We don't have a bigger framework to analyze that. So which leaves us, which does, which because of which we cannot extract a lot of insights from that phenomena. And so uh, my goal here is to talk a little bit about those theories and concepts and frameworks so that over time we can, instead of just talking about the facts, we can also interpret the bigger picture about what's happening. So for example, if I give the example of science, for example, we see things falling, like if we naturally, if we drop something, it falls down. So because we have studied that it's because of gravity. So it's not a mystery for us. So it could be anything. It could be a book, it could be a human, it could be any object. And we don't think, why is this falling? Like these are so different things. But we know that there is a unifying concept underneath that. It's called gravity. In the same way, if we see the cycle of day and night and so on. Suppose we didn't have the theory, and this is one of the things why a lot of people are more gullible to various theories and manipulations because they do not have the underlying theory. For example, let me give an example of another natural phenomena, the day and night cycle, or the lunar eclipse and solar eclipse, and so on. So before we had a more better understanding, before us humans had a better understanding, people thought that during a lunar eclipse, the dragon ate the moon, and so on and so forth. So what happened was that we observed the external phenomena, but we did not have a framework. We did not have a more better way to understand, to interpret what's happening around us. So in the early days, the interpretation was that something ate the moon, so it went away, and then the next day it just spit it out and you can see it again. So that was an explanation to phenomena. And people said, okay, it makes sense. I mean, it's a, however flawed the logic is, at least it's an explanation. But upon better and better analysis, we came to know about the shadow of the moon, and so on and so forth. So that's a much more rational and more educated opinion or an explanation. So similarly, in various social phenomena in politics and business, mostly I'm talking about social sciences. There are various phenomena, and most of the people do not have a better uh, framework to understand, and that's why a lot of influencers and so on, they just give whatever explanation, and as long as it makes some kind of sense, in the same way that a dragon ate the moon, that's why it disappeared. It I know it sounds very
mm,
odd, but at least you consider, oh yeah, it's an explanation. It's an explanation. So if for any political phenomena, they can just put on some explanation, and we just tend to just accept it. So for that to not happen, so I just want to talk about a little. So I want to present those things. And by no means this is not my own theories or anything. And these are more established theories from people who study international relations, politics, and so on, or any field of social science, they have studied that during their educational time, like during undergraduate, postgraduate, and so on. So that's the motivation behind me talking this. So what's the first topic that I want to talk about is something called some theories of understanding uh, international relations and geopolitics. So I'll start with, I'll directly talk about mention the video that I was talking about. Okay, so I don't think the audio is available to you. You can't hear the audio.
No.
Okay. Anyways, the point is not to show the videos anyways. It's mostly about this things. Okay, so this is one of the concepts of international relations. The concept is called balance of power. So what this concept says is that states, by states they mean countries or nations. So states, the behavior of in terms of, I'm not talking about internal politics here, politics within the country. I'm talking about communications among countries, like the US-China relation and all of those things. Those are the examples: India-Pakistan, India-China, European Union, and US, and so on and so forth. So what motivates the decisions that they make among themselves? So what the concept of balance of power says that there is a tendency to maintain a balance of power among the major states in the world. So whenever a certain nation gets more power, becomes more powerful, starts to form a monopoly. So then what happens is that the other remaining states, they start to develop relationships among themselves, or what's the word? Coalitions among themselves to counterbalance the influence of this major power, so that the equilibrium of multiple countries holding power is brought back. So uh, that's the concept of balance of power. This is the natural tendency, or this is the natural order that is, I would say, that's a natural state. And so from this concept, we can now, if we try to just try to apply this concept to a real life observation. So whatever is happening with the United States right now, there's the growing influence of China, and okay, now I might talk about certain topics which you may not be aware of, about like concepts of BRICS and all the alliance between the BRICS countries and so on. So in the coming days, I will talk about those uh, topics as well. But today I wanted to talk about this because once you have this framework, then you'll understand the logic behind why I'm talking about BRICS, why this but the BRICS countries means Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and there are other countries as well. So these are forming a new, different world order that's trying to counter the influence of United States and so on. So that's when I'll not talk about the details about what's happening there, but the fact that these kind of things are happening shows that this theory at least holds some predictive power. So you can see that this was made in 2012. It was made 13 years ago. So the state of the world was quite different 13 years ago. The US,
Mm.
even though it wasn't as much in their their dominance was not as much challenged by China or other this kind of coalition of nations as it's being done right now. So even though it was this concept was talked 12 years ago, we can see that yes, as per the predictions of this concept of balance of power, things are happening in that way. We can observe right now. This kind of new countries are coming up, trying to counterbalance the influence of United States. So this is one example. So before I continue with something else, do you have any comments, anything to say? Any thoughts?
No, no, not really.
Okay. Okay, so this is just one of those concepts. And yeah, even I have quite a bit to learn about those things. So this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And the other thing that I have been looking up recently is Ray Dalio. He's an investor, and he has written a book called The Changing World Order. That is yet another way of explaining, I would say, the phenomena, the various things that occurs in our society. So the book that I'm talking about is this. Okay, is there a video? Okay. So the whole concept about this, the very big picture idea of this book is that events in our society happens in a cyclical manner. So the things that are happening today is so it's not exactly the same, but similar events has happened in the past as well, and it happens through a cycle of it happens through repeated cycles, and so that's the main idea here. So what he told was that, and also the powers, the nations that are in power keeps changing over time and time again. So he provides certain graphs where he talks about it. I think around the 1500s and so on, the Dutch, the way United States has the global dominance right now. So in the 1500s, it was the Dutch, yes, and then they
Mm,
started to decline, and the British Empire arose. Then the British, as long as the cycle of British Empire went down, the the U.S. Empire, uh, they rose. They got the opportunity to rise. And now he is saying that the U.S. Empire is coming towards the decline of its cycle. And he says that it's not necessary that if a if the major superpower is in decline, that there's someone else will be there. So it also depends upon the others, the condition of the other competitors, whether they're strong enough to uh, take advantage of the weakness of the dominant superpower. And by the looks of it, there's definitely China is definitely strong enough to counter the balance, to take advantage of the weakness of the United States. So this book was written in 2021, and it's I think means the big picture that I can see of the things that are happening in the United States and the dominance in terms of technology and everything that's happening in China. So even the concepts and the ideas that's been mentioned here, it has this predictive power that it has successfully predicted how things are happening right now in a big picture, not the exact things, but the things that are happening. And and from this point of view, we can understand the actions taken by the United States. For example, the things that the whole tariffs and everything that United States are doing is just a mechanism for them. It's a what's the word I can't. It's a self-preservation thing that they're trying to do. They're trying to the tariffs are meant so that the manufacturers, instead of producing it on manufacturing things on China, they bring manufacturing back to the United States. Now, recently, you might have heard of the news that they are trying. The U.S. government is threatening to put tariffs on Apple if they are producing manufacturing iPhones in India. So it's not just
Mm.
that don't want to do it in China, they don't want to do it anywhere. So the whole idea behind them is that at least in some level they have realized that they are on the decline phase and they want to bring manufacturing within their own country. They want that capabilities within themselves because otherwise they are empowering, they are giving a chance for other countries to develop certain skill sets, which they already did with China. Now I don't know, but I'm curious that why did they do this in the first place? Why did you choose a country? You outsource the manufacturing to a different country. Now you outsource them and then you allow them to develop that skill, and now it's biting you back. Now they're better at manufacturing than you are. So that's the thing. The
But
so many people are
initially
okay.
the choice to the choice to outsource was the companies, the corporation, not the government.
Yeah,
Even now, given the choice of cheap labor, the corporates will choose any other country, but it is by enforced by the government that they want to bring it back. Ultimately, it will first impact the American citizens only with higher cost of the items.
yeah. So this goes on to say that the corporations in the United States has more power than the government. That's the conclusion we can say because no Chinese company is going to counter. There's the story that Jack Ma, I think he commented something about the Chinese government and he disappeared for some 3 months or something. So the fact that these things are happening in the United States, then you can make a prediction. You can get an idea about where the power lies. Even in the recent Nvidia, one of the interviews by Jensen Huang. So he was talked about. So there's this ban on the sale of Nvidia, the most advanced Nvidia chips to Chinese companies because the whole strategy is that they want to keep Chinese research in AI at some distance. They want to, I've read somewhere that they want to at least keep a gap of 18 months in terms of the technological progress between China and US. That means US wants to be at least 18
Mm.
months ahead of of China in terms of their progress in AI, in fundamental AI research and so on. So they are prohibiting the sale of the latest NVIDIA chips to the Chinese companies. And when and when Jensen Huang was asked about those things in the interview, so even though of course, since he's a CEO, he knows how to give interviews, he knows how to give diplomatic answers. So even though in some ways he mentioned about that, yeah, the government is doing the best for his country and so on and so forth, he gave the diplomatic part of the answer. But he also mentioned that if we do not uh, if Nvidia doesn't supply them their own domestic companies, and he also gave explicitly mentioned Huawei and so on, that they will mention they will provide the chips. So they are going to get one way or another from somewhere. So why not give it from Nvidia itself? So that's the broad comment that he was trying to make. So the fact that he's talking like that says that there is this, you can understand that they have some certain kind of freedom to talk about like that. So no Chinese company would say anything like that. So we can talk about where the power comes from. And right now, I'm talking it from a very objective and strategic point of view. No, by no way this is a judgment about, yeah, China is worse or US is more powerful or more open, anything, nothing. That's not my idea. China has their own way of doing things. US has their own way of doing things. So it's not a judgment, and that's that had I try my best not to put my judgments on those things. I'm just trying to understand how where the power lies, and which will help me make better predictions about how things are going to happen. So, anyways, yeah,
Mm.
this is another one of those ideas, the changing world order. And as I was looking through this changing world order, I came to know that there is a similar book which is known as the fourth turning. It's called the fourth turning, and it has a very similar idea as well about this, that the history repeats in cycles and so on. And I think in that Wikipedia page, I got to know about this concept of cyclical theories of history. So it's a broader idea which says that history repeats, the patterns are very cyclical in nature. Certain things happen over and over again. Now I'm mentioning it very abstractly because even I haven't gone through those topics in detail. So in the future, I will hope I'm going to elaborate those things in much more details. So let me just go through that page. Let me directly search this thing. I don't remember which one is the, it's probably not this one. Okay, anyways, I forgot which Wikipedia page it was, but the whole idea is that there are certain ways in which this patterns emerges and so on and so forth. So, uh, and the main idea over here they told is that it's being said in both the fourth turning uh, and the Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order, is that these cycles are typically bigger than the human lifespan. It goes more than 100 years for one cycle to complete. And so people who haven't actually studied those things, they do not have a first-hand experience of the whole cycle at once. And that's why when something happens, they think that it's happening for the first time. Because within their lifetime, that's happening for the first time. But if you study history, you will know that this is a cyclical thing. It will happen over and over again. It has happened before. If you can see the patterns, it has happened before and it will happen in the future again. So that's the whole idea about the cyclical theories of history. So these are the
So is this theory like properly documented, or
properly documented in the
like is it
sense.
an official theory, or
Yes,
is
I
it
mean,
like an official theory or just some random hypothesis by someone?
so the theory and hypothesis in the sense in social sciences, the thing is that if you can, if it can explain certain phenomena, so it's good enough to be complete, to be told as a theory. Even in natural sciences. So
No,
what's the
what I mean
theory?
is it peer reviewed? Like is it debated by others? Like
No, no, it's accepted. It's not. I mean, theories can never be peer reviewed because the theory is just an explanation. Experiments can be peer reviewed to say that okay, this phenomena occurred, because theories can always be disproven if you give one example that doesn't fit the theory. The theory is a generally accepted explanation about something which most probably which explains certain things. For example, the theory of gravity by Isaac Newton. So his theory ultimately was proven wrong by Newton, by Einstein's theory. But for a certain for 200 years, from whatever was observable within our eyes, it explained perfectly. So the experimental phenomenon was perfectly explained by Newton's theories. But when certain things were not able to be explained by that theory, so it broke apart. But still an approximate idea. So if you look at the cyclical pattern theories, so as long as it gives you certain predictive idea that okay, I have observed certain phenomena on the past and I have created an explanation that these things happen cyclically over and over again. And if I can now predict, if I can say that based on this theory, I think this is going to happen. And in the future, if that thing happens, we can say that yes, it has some degree of predictive power. But unlike scientific experiments that we can do in a lab, social experiments we can't do it. Now we can't say that we can't simulate that what will happen to US. Will US decline in the next 50 years and China rise? We'll have to wait and watch. We can't simulate it in a computer and see or in a lab. So from that point of view, I think it cannot be tested, but I think it's people accept it. I think so. I think it's quite different in terms of social sciences. Like it can be debated, or you can have alternate explanations about how we can interpret certain phenomena. So that's the thing. And I mean, there are other concepts which I know more about, like in economics. There are three or four ways to interpret a certain same phenomena, and depending on which group you ask, uh, they will give they will never agree. Means they will continuously speak over one another. That no, this explanation is not correct. That's the reason. So now that you have mentioned, I might research on that and bring it to you maybe in the next discussion. Uh, because there is this more liberal economics. I can't remember the exact name right now. And there's this Austrian School of Economics. These two have very fundamentally different ways of explaining every phenomenon, every economic phenomena. And these two groups will never agree on how to interpret any specific economic phenomena. So that's the concept, that's the idea in social sciences.
Mhm.
Because yeah, the main idea was that experiments can be verified, but theories can never be verified because it's your interpretation of a phenomena. That's the thing. Because similar ideas exist in quantum mechanics as well. There's this famous concept of the various interpretations of quantum mechanics. There are many interpretations. All the science fiction concept that you heard, we look at this multiverse and so on. And there's this, that's one of the interpretations, which is not very famous. The thing is that this, in the past 5 6 years, in the past 5 6 years, this idea has become more popular, this multiverse theory. But in the beginning, there's something called the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics that was more popular. And I think it's still the mainstream, but it's rising and so on and so forth. So the factual observation, every physicist agrees on the factual observations, the experiments. But how they interpret depends. Some prefer the Copenhagen interpretation, cause some prefer the multiverse interpretation, and so on and so forth. So interpretation is up to them. So
So,
there's a
like, usually
yeah,
what I understand about theory is the theory provides some kind of explanation, like you're saying.
yeah,
So, what is the explanation for this cyclical behavior based on this theory? Because what what is written here also is that historical events repeat themselves in cycles. But
yes.
that is just basic observation. What is the theory?
Okay, let me Morse. In modern science, the term theory refers to scientific theories, a well-confirmed type of explanation of nature, made in a way consistent with scientific method. This such theories. In contrast to the common uses of the word theory that implies something is unproven or speculative, scientific theories are distinguished. So, hypothesis. Okay, now because this reminded me of a video that I watched. and so on and so forth. Yeah, bag theory. I think as well. Okay, so maybe you can say these four definitions here.
Mm.
Okay, so first of all, the first thing that comes is the facts, the observations about the world. Now, after facts, we come up with a hypothesis, which is a potential explanation about why things happen. I think so. Let me first go through this there, then I might be able to connect with how those things are, whether those things are theory, hypothesis, or what else, what is that thing? Now, hypothesis is a possible explanation, and theory is that if it passes, if the hypothesis passes some tests, then we can say that it's a theory. So why not ask this thing? Okay, so this is one example. So a fact is we can observe that people get sick. Okay, now how do we explain that people get sick? So there are the various three. Suppose we have three hypotheses here. Sickness is caused by bad air. Because of air, sickness is caused.
Yeah, yeah.
The second is the imbalance of bodily fluids. I mean, these are actual things. Means if you look at the past concepts of sickness happens, so these are the things that people actually thought. Sickness is caused by imbalance of bodily fluids, Humer's theory, and sickness is caused by tiny organisms, germ theory. So after testing various hypotheses, scientists eliminated the incorrect ones and found overwhelming evidence that diseases are caused by microorganisms. Now we can practically test this one. So suppose one hypothesis is that it is caused by bad air. Okay, then put one human being in that air and see if sickness happens or not in certain circumstance in that circumstances or not. So if in all cases it happens, then definitely it would have passed. But most probably it doesn't. I mean, I have to look more into miasma, what it actually means. I mean, you can, of course, you can get sick. For example, if it's polluted air, certain kind of sickness might happen. But I mean, allergic kind of reactions you might happen because of bad air. But you won't get fever because of bad air and so on, or certain kind of other diseases
You will
like
probably have lung problems, right?
yeah, you might get those kind
Because
of
of some particles in air.
yeah. So you might
So
get
it's not
sick.
entirely
That's
false.
yeah. I mean,
Because bad air does cause sickness.
it does, but
Leave this one. Could you better ask it to give example in social theory, social sciences, because
let me
understanding
just
this is
talk
not on point. Right?
because the sickness here was this idea they have talked about is it's a different thing. In social sciences, it will be much more difficult because in natural science, because
Yeah, that is
people
why what I want
working,
to see what it has to say.
I think whatever AI is going to say is going to be quite not good because even proper scientists they despise social scientists trying to take ideas from natural science because they say that what you are doing is social science. Social science is a pseudoscience for them. They directly say these things because as I was studying quantitative finance, these people they use concepts from physics to explain financial concepts, and these physicists they say that finance this is a pseudoscience. Don't use our concepts for explaining social phenomena. So if they will, I think I don't know how accurate those things would be. So when he talks about sickness here, it's a very it has first of all let's given a very simplistic answer. So by sickness, suppose if I'm very specific about a certain sickness, I mean not just general. Of course, you can get allergies from sickness, but certain sickness that is uh, caused only by like what causes like for example flu is definitely caused by certain kind of bacterial infection. Okay, let's consider a bacterial infection that happens. Suppose if you cut your
Times
leg.
up.
Yeah, okay. So I have asked this to give a I asked to give an example from social science about this.
Mm,
So I don't know how accurate or if it makes any sense. A fact is an objective and verifiable observation about society. Example, the literacy rate in India is 77%. Okay. Hypothesis is a proposed explanation for this phenomena. Example suggests this theory. I mean, this is a very complex one. So one very simple idea, one very simple example in my head is, for example, if you suppose you are a lawyer at a court and you are defending a person who has been accused of murder. So you have to give suppose you say that my client was not at the place of the murder when the murder happened. At suppose at 9 o'clock he wasn't there. So you have to provide a theory based on all the evidence that existed there. So maybe there is his car is at that house. So you have to give a theory that explains that his car might be at that house, but he wasn't there. Somebody drove that car. So you have to give a satisfiable. So there can be many hypotheses that explains all the factual evidence that was collected. For example, his car was there, or uh, maybe his fingerprint was there. Those are the facts. So step one is facts. So those are the facts. Now, your opposition will try to create a theory that will theory is just a story. He'll try to create a story around those evidence that will try to place your client in that house. And your objective is to create a theory to not place him in that house or somewhere else. And because facts are the only thing available here, so nobody can give until and unless there is some actual eyewitness, then there's no point of doing anything else. But let's assume that there's no eyewitness. Both of you are working on the facts that are available here, and it's a very simple I mean, in science itself, the same thing happens. We are handed with facts. We observe the world around us, and we come up with explanations. So at the end of the day, the one person who gives the better story, the better theory that connects all the available evidence, the judge will be more impressed by that. That's the whole idea. So if you are a good law, if you can somehow create a story that doesn't place your client in that crime scene, you will win. But if your opposition presents a better theory that proves that your from all the evidence that your client was in that place, you lose. So that's the thing. There is the facts and there are two hypotheses. Now, which hypothesis better explains those things to the satisfaction of the judge? Is the accepted theory. So if we now translate this concept to science, that's the thing. We have factual observations, and then there are explanations that different people gives to different people to different things. And the judge in his this case is not just one person; is the whole world. Now there are the, as you can see, there will be different schools of thoughts that there are certain groups of people that will say that for from my point of view this theory is a better explanation of how things happen. Other group of people will say that no, this theory has certain loopholes, or this thing it explains certain things but it doesn't account for certain things, and so on and so forth. So theories are always debatable. So that's the whole idea about
Yeah,
theory.
so in sciences, social sciences, this at least the cyclical theory is using the word or the term theory very loosely, like it is not actually a theory. Because I'll show you my screen.
Okay.
So like I asked ChatGPT this thing. So here you can see it says the cyclical theory is more of a framework or interpretive paradigm. So the word theory in the natural or like formal sciences has certain criteria that the theory has to follow. For example, it shows this some questions.
Okay.
So like, does it have empirical basis? Is it falsifiable? Is it generalizable? So other things like that. So
So from
maybe
this,
this yeah. So this is not exactly a theory, but a model.
yes, it is a model, but it is also it. Can you show all the table? Okay, so first one, empirical basis. So it is based on empirical observations. Both the four, I don't know about the fourth turning. I haven't read
It
the book,
says
but uh,
it's loosely based on historical observation
yeah, it is based on historical observations. That is empirical basis. So what you say, it's not in the modern scientific sense. Why? Because it's based on historical observation. So
because it is
as
loosely
opposed,
based on it is not strictly based on.
so I'm not trying. So I don't get what it means by strictly and loosely. So
Loosely would be that you don't actually have all the facts from the past.
yes, in that sense,
It is
because
all
unlike, yeah, this I get this what loosely means that way. Okay, so social sciences, certain things are not as rigorous as natural sciences like physics, because in physics, biology, chemistry, you can uh, create experiments in a very controlled environment in your lab. So those are very, you can have the every minute details there. So in that, from that perspective, it's not very rigorous. That I can say. That is true in terms of social sciences. And more importantly, in if you're making theories of history, because history you can't create experiments about history. So from that point of view, it's understandable. But then again, what I can, in defense of Ray Dalio and his theory, what I can say is that he gave multiple examples of various civilizations. As I said, he talked about the Chinese Empire, the old Chinese Empire from 500 years ago, then the Dutch Empire, then the US, then the British Empire, then the US Empire, and so on. So those there are certain patterns that were common patterns that were available in various is in all of those civilizations, those things. And the second thing was that he mentioned that he one of the reasons he made those theories because he is an investor. The and his primary objective of an investor is to have an understanding of the world so that he can make sound investments. So for him, he created a framework that helps him make investment decisions. So this thing and he's renowned for his investments for making good returns. So certainly his thing worked for him. So he's more like an if we talk about natural sciences, he's more like an engineer than a scientist or than a that thing. Yeah, so even here it says that it's not peer reviewed in a scientific sense. So yeah, as I said, he's not a social scientist, he's an investor. So he has written it from his perspective about how he views the world is changing and the things that are happening and how that framework helps him make certain decisions. So those are the big picture framework perspective that he has made these things about. And so
Yeah,
it served his purpose. So that's the important thing here. So and so if you could look into the details of his book, he has mentioned that this is not intended to be a scientific in any way scientific, but he has talked with a lot of social scientists and many other experts in in these fields, and then came up with this big picture framework. So that's the whole idea here. And ultimately, it's all about that thing. So let me just talk about my own investments. So how obviously I just knew about this thing right now, but for the past 3 years, I have my own framework and I've used my own frameworks to understand those things, and I made my decisions based on that. And right now I have certain returns and certain performance of my investments in my portfolio. Now what I'll do here is that I'll give it to ChatGPT and I'll ask it to analyze its performance and I'll share it on the screen. It's in my phone. I will do it. I have uploaded it from my phone. Now I'll open it here on my laptop. Okay. So I provided this. This is my performance here. The most important metric that was shown here is something called the XIRR. So I won't go get into the details of what
Mhm.
XIRR is and anything and so on. But the thing that you have to notice here is this one. My portfolio's XIRR is 65.88%. Okay. And this is the Nifty 50 XIRR. This is considered the benchmark. So by benchmark, the benchmark index is the index that you can just invest there. This index consists of the top 50 biggest companies in India. So you can choose to invest there, and you will get a return of
Mm.
you'll get a certain amount of return, which is quite good enough. So as per this, and this is for the past 3 years. So by default, you instead of doing any analysis or any thinking and so on and so forth, just just put it there. Just put it in Nifty 50, and you would have gotten 18.69% anyways. No analysis, no thinking, nothing is required. On the other hand, I did my analysis, my thinking, and so on, and I got a 65.88% XIRR in the past 3 years. Now I said it to ChatGPT that provide your analysis on this performance. Okay, interpretation. Let's come to this. These are just the factual information.
Mhm.
So it says that a 65.8% XIRR over 3 years is exceptionally high. So you have can't see because of this. Yeah, especially compared to Nifty's 18.69. You have made clearly some high performing investment choices or time to interest very well. This kind of return is not common in passive strategies and suggests either this. Takeaways: beating the index by nearly 50,000 indicates a strong active management capability. That's the thing I talked about. That I had certain understanding about how stocks might behave by understanding how the economy works or what's the mindset of people in general. So I am not a social scientist. My thoughts and approaches are not peer reviewed, but I have a big picture framework of understanding that, okay, this is how so people as a group think. This is how social and political changes happen in society. So even at a very primitive level, I had certain level of understanding which made those investment decisions. And I am
Mhm.
I'm a very amateur person. I just do it without much analysis and so on. And I'm only 29 years old. On the other hand, Ray Dalio is 72 and he's one of the biggest investors, one of the most well-known investors in the US. So just think about what kind of frameworks he has in terms of understanding how the world works, how economies work, how what things people value, and how they do not value, and what things people do not value. So he has a very he has certain way of looking at the world. So so that's what he has all
Yeah.
condensed
So
down
like,
the book.
mhm.
Yeah,
So like as a individual experience plus someone with his kind of experience, he has shared his views and like how he sees the world, which is fine. But
yeah,
I'm just saying that as a theory, it's not exactly a theory. Even a
yeah,
scientist, like one person, will not just pass a theory. It will always be verified by others. So, and this is not something theoretical also. I mean, it is theoretical, but it is not something to be verified because
Yeah,
ultimately he is sharing his opinions of how he has done.
it's a framework. It's not a theory, but it's a framework, you can say,
Yeah,
of understanding how things work.
yeah, yeah. So it's a philosophy in a way. You're not supposed to, if it makes sense to you, you will follow it.
Yeah, it's a, yeah, you can say.
Like so many other existing philosophies, because there are multiple philosophies. No one, not you cannot say any one of them is correct, others are wrong.
Yeah, but
But based on
the
what
same.
resonates with you, you will yeah, I mean, I don't think all the investors follow exactly what Ray Dalio did. There will be surely some high level investors as well who will think what how he sees the world is not exactly accurate.
Yes,
So
that's
like
true.
there is clearly not one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that is true. But now, if we talk about theories are, you see, when you talk about peer reviewed and those things verifiable, theories can never be verified. Theories are always interpretations of things. Only experiments can be verified and peer reviewed. Peer reviewed, I mean that if I say that under such and such circumstances, initial conditions, I achieve certain outputs. And if you say that, okay, if you tried the same thing in your lab, you'll achieve the same outputs. And if 10 different groups of scientists do this experiment and they find the same outputs, then you can say that yes, uh, whatever you have done is peer reviewed, it is accepted, it is done. But how you interpret it is called it that is a theory. So in chat, okay, maybe let me start a new chat, not on this one. I talked about quantum mechanics. Let me tell you. You can look at the first sentence, what it says. These are experimentally verified fact principles that form the backbone of QM, regardless of interpretation or theory. I mean, there is some observations that is you can't deny it. You can see it with your own eyes. The observation can be seen. You can't see it. If a man is standing in front of me and if I say that no, I can't see, that is lying. The man exists there. That is a fact of life. But how you interpret the thing, now that's the thing. So these are the facts of quantum mechanics: that wave particle duality, superposition, quantization, and so on and so forth. These are the observation. These are the accepted facts. Means this exists. It's not someone's imagination or anything else. Now, how do you interpret those things? Okay, this now we have this Copenhagen interpretation, the many world interpretation, the pilot wave interpretation, and so on and so forth. There are many different things. So there are two very common ones are these two. That's why I think so. These are the top two things. So let me tell you something about this. So it says that one of the observations is this thing, this wave particle duality. So this observation says that particles could be wave or not particles, but things could be waves and particles at the same time, or at least at certain point of their existence. Now, this Copenhagen interpretation says that unless a person observes something, it exists in a state of wave. So, for example, the laptop, in a very simplified way, you are staring at a laptop right now. So, it's a particle right now. But if you close your eyes, and if you turn your head this way, now it's a wave. It doesn't mean it's a wave. Now I can say it's a particle. So, it's a wave or a particle. So, see, the wave function collapses when observed. So, when I've observed, it's no longer a wave. It's a particle. It becomes a particle. Okay. And so, no objective reality until measured. That's the thing. On the other hand, the many worlds interpretation says that there are multiple. So when you say Wave function says that it exists in all possible states. So for example, if I all possible states, it means that suppose for heads and tails. So when you don't observe something, it exists both as a head or as a tail. So whatever all the possibilities that can happen exist at the same time. When you observe, one of the possibilities exists and the other goes away in Copenhagen interpretation. In many world interpretation, what happens is that whatever can happen, everything happens in the multiple universes. So every observation, suppose now if this is a pen, now if I throw here and I caught it again. This is one possible outcome. The other possible outcome would have been that it fell from my hand and fell into the ground, but it didn't happen. So as per Copenhagen interpretation is that one of the interpretation happened and the other outcome didn't happen. But many worlds interpretation will say that it happened, but it happened in a parallel universe. So everything, whenever a certain, what can I say, a certain event happens, the universe splits into multiple universes. And in one universe, I caught this pen. In some other universe, everything else is same. You and I are having the same conversation, but the pen fell apart. It fell into the ground. So that's the interpretation. So now for the last 80 to 100 years, these two groups are fighting among themselves that no, this interpretation is right, this interpretation is wrong, and they will continue to keep fighting unless the only way the two theories can be resolved is that if one theory has a better predictive power that the other doesn't. So suppose hypothetically there is something that Copenhagen interpretation cannot explain, give any kind of explanation, or at least even if it gives certain explanation, it is very simplistic, like it's very childish explanation, which the manual interpretation will give a better explanation. So only in those kind of things that even if the diehard fan of Copenhagen interpretation will not be able to justify only then the other one will win. And if they're competing, then there's no way that they're going to have, means any one of them will win. So that's the idea about theories. It is always about how you interpret something. But the observations now, out of all of them, there could be different groups of scientists in all of those eight groups, eight interpretations. But all of them will agree on these six concepts that there is wave particle duality, there is superposition, there is quantization. Nobody will disagree on these things. The disagreement comes in how you interpret those facts. Just like in the crime scene that I talked about. If the car exists there, if the evidence shows, then nobody will say that no, this is an illusion. The car doesn't exist. No, that's a fact. You cannot deny that. Now you can come up with explanations by saying that no, my client it was planted by someone else, and so on. You can give a different explanation than the one who is trying to prove you guilty. To prove your innocence, you'll give a different explanation. But you cannot change the fact that no, this is an illusion for the camera. The car is not actually there. You cannot deny facts. Facts has to be facts. How you interpret it will be different. So that's the difference. But anyway, yes, his frameworks, uh, what was his name? Ray Dalio, yeah, that is his way of looking at things based on what he have observed, and it worked for him. And
Mhm.
yeah, overall, that's the whole idea about theories versus observations. But yeah, I think so. During this discussion, even I did not know certain things. Like this discussion forced me to think about certain things that I did not know about or didn't push myself too hard to think about. So this is the benefit of doing this kind of discussions. I mean, we are forced to think there are certain implicit assumptions. We think that we know some things, but if someone asks you to explain it, those loopholes start to come around.
Mhm.
So this has opened up my perspective about certain things which I thought that I knew, but I clearly didn't knew it as well. So do you have anything to say? Any other topics we can talk about?
Uh, I had some points, but I think I'll reserve it for some other time. Maybe it's already too long.
Yeah, I think this discussion was centered around this whole. I mean, it is complete Indian of itself. That is, that's okay with this one.
Mm.